So here is the next t-shirt. This is another Congress, the Chaos Communication Congress t-shirt from the 29th C3. So there's actually not too much I can talk about this Congress, so this will probably be a little bit of a shorter video, but whatever, let's have a closer look at the design. So there it is, it says, "Not my department, 29th C3. Yeah, as you can see, a pretty modern, cool looking design. I think it still looks like a really cool t-shirt, and I really like that one. This t-shirt might actually be one of the last Congress t-shirts I have. I would have liked to have more, but getting Congress t-shirts is always terrible. Especially in the later years, there were just so many more visitors, and then the t-shirt sale would like open at a certain time, and you would have like hour-long queues, like insane long queues to get a t-shirt. And I wanted to experience Congress. I wanted to visit talks and whatever. Like I didn't really have the time or didn't really want to stand in line. Up until this point, I was always kind of lucky with getting a t-shirt because I had friends that were involved in the organization and they could just like, get me an early t-shirt or whatever. I didn't really have to stand in line. But as soon as my sources dried up in future congresses, I would refuse to stand in line. So typically I don't have t-shirts from those times. I need to check. We will see. Maybe there will be one or two more t-shirts, but as far as I remember, this was one of the last t-shirts that I got. We will see. So this Congress now moved from Berlin to Hamburg, and I really liked the Hamburg location. It was much bigger, and it had like multiple floors and very kind of intricate smaller pathways with a lot of tables and cool stuff around. There was a carpeted floor, low ceiling, so it felt a lot more cozy and cool. I really liked the Hamburg location. And Congress would stay for quite a few years in Hamburg. Now, this Congress in Hamburg, I also remember staying in a hostel with other people from Shackspace. I didn't want to pay for a hotel yet. In the future years, I will go into hotels instead. So I was still living in Stuttgart and I was still connected with the Shackspace. I mean, as I mentioned, at this point, I had severe anxiety issues, so I wouldn't go as much to Shackspace anymore. But I was still obviously like connected, and it was kind of like my only point of contact for the Congress. And also, the Shackspace had a table that they organized at the Congress, so this was like my drop-off point. Like I could always leave like my backpack and my jacket at the table and then like wander around, go to talks and whatever. I just want to briefly mention my anxiety again, and this is kind of like what happens like in the future conferences as well. At this point, like my anxiety was so bad that, for example, I would always sit at the border in those talks. So I always wanted to sit right where I could basically escape. Ideally right next to a door and then on the outside, so I could leave immediately. And there was this problem that people were always sitting scattered around. And especially for popular talks, they would always make this game where everybody had to stand up and then move into the middle to like defragment. They were calling it defragmenting the room. They were like shoving them together so that the spaces would get free on the sides and people could sit down. And obviously that is horror for me. Like that was the horror. So every time this would happen, I would be this awkward asshole who would refuse to move to the inside, or I would get up, stand next to the seat, let everybody compress in, and then I would sit down again to my seat on the aisle. The Congress is extremely aware when it comes to mental health. They have like spaces where, for example, people on the neurodiverse spectrum can have a quiet place to like recharge and whatever. Like they are very well aware and they take care. But I don't want them to obviously like pay attention to something like that for me. Like I understand that the defragmentation is important to get as many people in the room as possible. But luckily also nobody complained that I would like not do it, but they would allow me to stay on the side. For some outsiders, this might seem like an asshole who just wants to like keep his place and be very egoistic, but like this was the only way I was able to attend these talks. If I hadn't the ability to basically escape any moment if I get nauseous, there was no chance I would like sit inside of this talk. And this is basically my experience from here on out to any kind of like conference talk or whatever. Like I would always want to sit on the side. Same for like cinemas, if I would go to the cinema, I would have to sit on the side. If I travel in the train or in the plane, I don't want a window seat. The window seat would be worst case horror scenario if I have to ask a person to get out, like horror. I want to have an aisle seat so I can escape as quickly as possible if need to. Anyway, this conference also had a few notable talks that I still remember to this day. The biggest talk that still sticks with me is a talk by Natalie Silvanovic about hacking Tamagotchis. And she had this really cool phrase that just resonated with me and resonated with a lot of people. Let me just play it here for you.
And finally, I just wanted to have fun. Because you know, all those cool kids going out, going to clubs, they just haven't discovered reverse engineering yet.
So I was one of the people cheering. At this point, I have been like into war games for a couple of months. So, you know, I was like deep into like reverse engineering and stuff like this. So, you know, like I loved what she was saying there. I was, you know, immediately a fan of hers. You should definitely watch this talk. It's a really fun, interesting, great talk. And you should also look her up. She has an amazing career. She is now at Google Project Zero for quite a few years now. Like an amazing researcher, and her talks are always like very technical to the point, like really awesome, somebody I really admire and look up to. Then of course we have Sergey Bratus giving a talk again, and Travis Goodspeed was also giving a talk. Travis Goodspeed gave a talk about like programmable USB devices. He was introducing a PCB and software that he developed, I think, I'm not sure. It was called Face Dancer, and it basically allowed to program low-level USB devices in Python on your PC, and it was like kind of like proxying through the little chip. So you could write like a very high-level attackable like USB device on your computer and then plug it in into some other device to hack it. A very typical attack that can be done this way is you emulate a storage device, like a USB stick with a file on it, and some TVs install apps or updates through a file on a USB stick. And they have security checks of these things. But sometimes what can happen is that these security checks suffer from a time of check, time of use thing, where they first check the file, verify that it's okay, and then they take it and install it. But if you have like extremely low-level control over the USB stick, the first time when they check the signature of the file to be correct, you just deliver them, you know, the correct file. And then the second time when they read the file to actually install it, then you switch it out to your malicious file. And things like this were doable with this Face Dancer, and I thought this sounds awesome. And I believe he was giving out these boards for free if you want to have one. And I remember asking him if I can have one. And then a bit later at Checkspace, I like ordered all the parts and I was soldering it, but I didn't understand it. Like this was way above my level. Like I did not understand what to do with it. I soldered it, I think I installed the firmware, and that was it. I was just lost with that project. Maybe I should get back into it. I feel like nowadays I have a bigger chance to actually understanding it. And then there's another talk I remember, which was by Julia Wolf. Julia Wolf is a name that came up earlier also from Berlin Sites. You know, at this point I started to learn a few names, and so I saw her name coming up in the speaker list, and of course it is a talk that I want to see, and it was about exploit kits, or one particular exploit from one of the prominent exploit kits at the time. Was such a different time to think back that exploit kits were a thing. Like nowadays, exploit kits are not really a thing anymore, but it was like such a huge thing in the early 2010s, 2012, whatever this time range. Very interesting how kind of the typical attacks on the internet changed. Nowadays, it's very different. Yeah, that's all I have from this Congress. Again, a place I love to go back to, even with severe anxiety. It's still something I put myself through and go to there anyway. Being a loner, being alone, walking alone around and stuff like this, but you know, it was fun. Maybe at the end I can say that I'm not sure if I have played the CTF yet. I'm not sure, I really cannot tell you if I knew about Congress CTF at that point or not. Maybe there's a chance, but I feel like I have not been into CTFs yet. Still doing mostly war games and things like that. Anyway. See you tomorrow for another t-shirt video.